What were some of the other evergreens that were growing nearby the boxwoods that you were trimming a few weeks ago? That was a question that was asked by some of our viewers here on our YouTube channel. And in a follow-up answer to that question, I promised that I would come back and visit the site again to show you a couple of evergreen plants here that I think you might have spotted and want to know more about. Now, as you can see, it's a fairly windy day here out on the nursery, but that's okay because these are hardy plants, and that's part of the whole idea of having plants that are going to perform well here in our region, and particularly ones that are going to be evergreen and provide color through the whole year. The first plant that I think you might have noticed is this very nice variety of holly. It's called Ilex Red Beauty. It was one that was raised at Rutgers University by Dr. Elwyn Orton, and over the years we found it to be really an excellent performer, one that we certainly suggest you think about growing. And if you'd like to find out more about it, then take a few moments and scroll through some of the videos here on this channel, because there you'll find a lot more information about it and also how you can grow it, etc. And then stay tuned, because we're currently working on another much more detailed video that will tell you even more about how you can grow it and get the best from it. But I think the plants that you probably spotted and were most interested in were these three evergreens here. These are Chamaecyparis, lawsoniana, and the variety is called Golden King. There are three of them planted here at about 6-foot centers. They're in about 3, possibly 4 years. They're now beginning to really get established and putting on, as you see, a nice amount of growth during the year, probably something in the order of about 12 or maybe 15 inches. As you see, they are now beginning to develop their distinct pyramidal habit with this lovely semi-pendulous tips to the shoots. And when you look at it closely, you'll see that the foliage has this green and yellow bicolor effect, which is really very attractive. The interesting thing about this variety is that it was selected at a nursery in the Netherlands, a company called Weisselberg and Zoon, before the Second World War. It's been very popular in Europe and grown here too, and certainly over the years when we've been growing it here in the nursery and also on our various sites, we found it to be nice and vigorous and a good performer. There are apparently as many as 300 different variations, cultivars, of the Port Orford cedar, which is what the common name of this is. The original species comes from quite a small area in coastal Oregon and northern California. And it was introduced first during the 1850s to a nursery in Scotland owned by a man called Charles Lawson, which is why in Europe and also particularly in the UK, it's known there by the common name of Lawson cypress. It certainly enjoys growing in the conditions there where it's a little bit more moist. And here in our sites, we found this to be probably the most reliable of all of those 300 different cultivars that we've certainly grown here. It likes to grow in a reasonably sunny, well-drained site. Good drainage is important. It makes a very nice specimen, but when you go along to buy it in the garden centre, just be aware that it won't look like this. And that's because when you go along to buy it in the garden centre, you're going to see little plants like this, rounded mushroom-shaped plants with this beautiful kind of bicolor effect foliage, but showing no sign of producing a leader yet. Now it's really quite amazing how that little round dumpy mushroom shaped plant, when it gets into the ground and gets its roots established, suddenly starts to throw up a central leader that then in turn leads to this very nice pyramidal habit. But you'd be forgiven for thinking when you see them in the garden centre that it's going to be a completely different shaped plant. It is a lovely specimen, as you can see from this. And just wait till I show you what a final size specimen looks like. Very impressive. If you're thinking about growing it, it's important that the soil is free draining. Just an average garden soil will be fine as long as it doesn't lie wet. Out in the open in plenty of sun is exactly what it wants. But if you've got a hilly site or a windy place where it's got prevailing winter frost-laden winds coming in, that's probably best to be avoided, because here, as you'll see from this plant on the end, where it's buffeted by this wind that comes around the corner, it's fine, but it's just, as you see, a little skinnier on that side. So if you can tuck it in out of a windy place, so much the better. It's important when you're planting it that you dig a good, generous sized hole and incorporate plenty of organic matter. And when you plant it, put in plenty of mulch too, because that'll keep the ground cooler and of course keep more available moisture during the summertime. And if things get very hot and dry in the middle of the summer, it might be an idea to give it the odd shot of a little bit of supplemental watering too. So that's about it as far as maintenance is concerned. A little bit of mulch and some watering during dry periods, and that pretty much is it, except for just one thing I want to show you. If you look at these young plants here, you'll see that they are now beginning to develop twin leaders. Here's a stronger one on this plant, and then there's this one off to the side. And then take a look at this plant over here and you'll see that it's also happening here. Here's the stronger central leader, and off to the side is this leader here. Now it's important that we do something about that at this stage, and this applies to other conifers or evergreens as well, because what can happen is that if you have a plant with two leaders like this and they get a heavy bout of snow or an ice storm, they can split apart, and that obviously would ruin the shape. When you have a central leader going up through, they will be much stronger and be much better shaped as plants in the garden. So now is the perfect time for you to do something about that if you have it in your garden. And that's when you can take a pair of pruners like I'm doing now, and you can go in and just snip it back to reduce this stronger growth that's coming out of the top and keep that nice pyramidal habit. But there's a little trick I want to show you about where you can prune and how you can do it without the plant looking like it's mangled. And that is, if I can show you here what's going on. Here's the main leader that we want to keep. This is the one that's going to grow up and make a nice pyramidal habit. But then here's the competing one, and if you look in here at this point, you can see that there's a division going on in the shoot at this point. And that's where we take a pair of pruners, and if you come in here, you can then make a cut. And if you follow there, you'll see that I'm going to make the cut at this point, and then just take that out. And now that's taken this competing leader completely out. Then you can shorten back some of these other side lateral shoots, including this one up here, which again I'm doing at a joint. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a little joint here at this point, and that's where I'm going to come in with the pruners and just take it off at that point. And now that helps to redirect the growth up into this leader, which will then go on up and help to make that pyramidal habit. So by going around and just snipping a few of these more spreading shoots out and redirecting the growth up towards that central leader, you'll be able to make a nice, healthy, well-shaped plant. One of the things about this type of evergreen is that it really responds very well to pruning as long as you keep out to the juicy, healthy, vigorous young growth. You'll find that if you try to get in and cut way back in older plants where it's brown and dead in the inside, they really don't sprout too well from that. But as I say, in my case here, there really isn't that much need to go in and do a lot of trimming. The main thing is just make sure that as a young specimen, you've got it heading in the right direction. And so as you see, by just making a few little light pruning clips at this time, you can really set the plant up to become a nice shapely specimen in years to come. So remember that these plants have only been in here about 3 or 4 years. Now let me take you and show you what happens when they're a little bit older than these ones. And then 15 or 20 years later, this is what you can look forward to having. A beautiful, very elegant specimen that, of course, because it's evergreen, is going to give you color and interest through the whole of the year. And as you see, it grows into this very stately pyramidal habit that is perfect for providing interest and a background to, say, beds and borders like we have here at the entrance to our nursery. You'll also see by passing traffic that evergreens like this are very useful for helping to filter the sound of traffic noise. And so if you're at home and you're looking for something that's going to, say, screen from unsightly things like the utility poles here, or it might be upstairs bedrooms or a taller something that you're trying to screen in the background, then this might be something that you would consider planting. We can't remember exactly when we planted it. It was certainly 15 years ago and perhaps even as much as 20 years ago. But we do know that during all of that time, this plant has received absolutely zero maintenance. I can't remember us doing anything to it at all. So once you get it planted, you'll find that it's really very easy to look after, and because of all of the beautiful habit and grandeur, makes a beautiful specimen if you're able to provide the space for it. Because remember, right now it's about 20 foot or so high, and it's still going to go on up for another 10 or so foot yet. So give it plenty of space, be able to enjoy all of its beautiful shapely evergreen habit, and I think you'll enjoy having it, whether it's a small plant, a medium-sized plant, or getting, like this one is now, into a mature specimen. And incidentally, this is a good example of what I call progressionary spacing. If you look here, you'll see that these plants are put in, there's 3 of them here, at about 6 foot centers. We know that eventually these are going to grow into large specimens, but in the interim we put them here so that they fill this space and obviously look very attractive. As time goes on, in years to come, we're going to thin these out so that eventually there'll just be one of these specimens left, and that of course will then grow up and fill this space. So it's a good example of how when you start out with a site first, you sometimes will put plants in a little closer so that they fill out the space and give you something nice to look at in the short term, but with a view towards having the correct spacing when they become eventually mature. So there you are. I hope that explains a little bit more about some of the evergreens that you may have seen when I was doing our video on trimming boxwoods, which incidentally, if you haven't caught it yet, it's here on this channel. Tune in and take a look, because there is some interesting information on there. And if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, Can I suggest that you think about doing so? Because we're busy producing more videos like these all the time, and it would be great to have you join us and perhaps even ask a few more questions from time to time too. Meanwhile, this is David Wilson. Enjoy your gardening. It's good for us, and it's very good for our environment as well.